In this video, we're going to begin our lesson on ATP. Now, recall from our previous lesson videos that ATP is really just an abbreviation for a molecule called adenosine triphosphate, where the A in ATP is for the A in adenosine, the T in ATP is for the T in tri, and the P in ATP is for the P in phosphate. And so adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, is a high energy molecule that's used to power cellular activities. And so if the cell has a lot of ATP, then the cell has a lot of energy. But if the cell has a little bit of ATP, then the cell only has a little bit of energy. Now, really, there are only three primary components of an ATP molecule. And as its name implies, with the triphosphate part, tri meaning three, there are a chain of three phosphate groups in an ATP molecule. Now, the adenosine part of ATP is referring to a molecule that actually has two components. It has a pentose sugar, and it also has an adenine nitrogenous base. And so let's take a look at our image down below over here on the left-hand side to get a better understanding of the three components of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. And again, the triphosphate part is referring to a chain of three phosphate groups that you see here, 1, 2, and 3. And so we can go ahead and label these as phosphate groups, and there are in fact three phosphate groups on an ATP molecule. And then the adenosine portion of ATP is actually referring to both this sugar as well as this nitrogenous base. And so you can see that there is a pentose sugar here, which is this portion right here. And there's also a nitrogenous base right here, which is actually the nitrogenous base of adenine. And so together, the adenine nitrogenous base as well as the pentose sugar here make up the adenosine portion of ATP. Now, what's also important to note is that ATP is a high energy molecule, but the way that cells extract the energy from ATP is through a process called ATP hydrolysis. And so ATP hydrolysis is the process of breaking bonds between phosphate groups in an ATP molecule that ends up generating chemical energy that can be used by the cell, as well as ADP, or adenosine diphosphate, where the D here stands for di, meaning that it only has two phosphate groups. Now, also in some scenarios, sometimes ADP can also be hydrolyzed to form AMP, and the M here is referring to mono, adenosine monophosphate, and mono is a prefix that means just one phosphate. So let's take a look at our image down below over here on the right-hand side to get a better understanding of ATP and ADP hydrolysis. And so notice that at the very top here, we're starting with an ATP molecule. This is another representation of an ATP molecule. Notice that the adenosine is right here, the nitrogenous base, and the pentose sugar is represented right here in green. And then the three phosphate groups are right here, 1, 2, and 3. And so you can also represent ATP by this symbol right here, and we'll be doing that a lot throughout the rest of our course, representing ATP as just the symbol right here. Now, if we take ATP and we hydrolyze it, hydro is the prefix for water, lysis is the prefix for breaking down, or the root for breaking down. So using water to break down ATP, you can see that that water can be used to break the bonds between phosphate groups. The process of breaking the bonds between phosphate groups. And so when we break off this bond right here between the phosphate group using water, ultimately what we end up getting is one of the phosphate groups is released and also energy is released. And that energy can be used to power other chemical reactions and used to power other cellular activities. And so the molecule that remains only has 2 phosphate groups here. And so this molecule is now a DP, since the D here stands for diphosphate. And di is a root that means only 2 phosphates, one right here and the other one right here. The third one is released or attached to some other molecule. And in the process, a lot of energy is released. Now again, in some scenarios, ADP, this molecule here, it can be also hydrolyzed, releasing, so you can see the water here coming in to break this bond, and that will release the phosphate group and also release energy as well. And the AMP molecule is going to be made here. And again, the M in AMP is for mono, and mono means only 1 phosphate group. And so you can see how the hydrolysis here is going to lead to the release of energy. And the release of energy is really what's going to be used to power chemical reactions. And so this here concludes our brief introduction to ATP, and we'll be able to get some more practice applying these concepts and learning more about ATP as we move forward in our course. So I'll see you all in our next video.